Back with another Saluki Radio preview, this time with the full crew, alongside the coach Pat Poore and Mike Trude. I am Luke Martin. Defense is the focus today, and gentlemen, my goodness, a year ago, this was a Saluki defense that was drastically improved. You looked at it, Coach Poore, this was a unit that was top 15 in the country in 9 different categories. How can they sustain it going into 2024?
Well, that's the thing that's been impressive at practices, is that it's almost like they've not just maintained that standard, but elevated that a little bit in terms of just coaching and tweaking and, adapting it to the new personnel and the things that they did well last year. I mean, that was very evident a couple of practices that, we've improved in the depth of that. And obviously it showed last year that Antonio has a great grasp of how to use his personnel.
Kind of building off of what Coach Poore said, Mike, this was a group that had a change in defensive coordinator again right before camp, and it wasn't a story because of how, not just how the guys played, but how everybody treated, from Coach James all the way down.
Yeah, and what was so impressive was last year's team kind of set the foundation. And a lot of those guys are gone, but enough of them are back who were part of that first foundation and have just laid it out there for the guys who got a lot of reps during the year, but not nearly as many as the starters did a year ago. But you've got the defensive line. Almost every one of the guys who will play had significant snaps a year ago. Were they in key situations? Yes, as the season went along, injuries play a part, and the Reeves brothers and Lewis Wilbert and those guys got significant snaps in huge games.
Let's talk about the defensive line first, Coach Poore. So many, when you're in a coaching role, it seems like that's where it starts. When you want to scout a defense, you want to see how they are up front. From what you've seen in practice, how can this group, really led by Dewey Green, the Reeves brothers, as Mike described, be even better this year?
Well, I think some of it is just in observing practices. Every one of those guys is different. And you look at a guy like Dewey Green, he's being coached on adding to his toolbox, his skill set. Maybe it's, a pass rush move or a get off or something like that. And then, then you look at Louis. I mean, they put him in a dragster stance, and, hey, can that guy be like a Micah Parsons guy? I'm excited for that kid because to me, that's a good move, because you've got to have pressure. And then inside, I think a lot of it, and I've been impressed with how as a team they've practiced together for improvement, because it's, there's guys out there fighting for spots. You want up-tempo, high-intensity practices, but you're also going against your own players.
Mike, it was one of the areas that we were anxious to see coming into camp. Both cornerbacks that started a year ago and played a ton of snaps were gone. Even Coach Hawthorne said, I'm really kind of calling my group the unknowns. Asked Jameer Khan about it. He didn't like the name. There's just a lot of confidence within that room. I don't want to speak for you, but throughout fall camp, that may end up being a position of strength for the Salukis.
Yeah, and Jameer's been kind of the spearhead for that group. He's got confidence, and a lot of that came from reps that he did get a year ago, special teams, and when he got into the ball game. But then you got Jeremiah McClendon coming in, and you've got some other guys at that defensive back position that have been there before as transfers, can play the position, and now they're getting fine-tuned. And for some reason, our defensive backs a year ago weren't beat deep very often at all. And I don't think this group is going to be beat deep very often at all. Their fundamentals are pretty sound, and their communication has been so good pre-snap, during the play, post-snap. They're just together. It's a good unit.
We saw how important last year Coach Poore, P.J. Jules, in terms of being versatile. You could use him in so many different ways. You look at that safety room now, Ubaid Steed, you got Des Hearns, who played a lot as a freshman last year. Those are 2 guys. C.J. Parson, another. Iverson Brown, you can't forget about Ivo. I mean, that's another room that just seems it's going to be extremely stacked, but stacked with guys who can be put in many different positions.
Yeah, I love the depth they have and the body types and the versatility they have at that position, because, obviously that star position is a big position, a guy who, call him a hybrid, whatever, that, can be a pressure guy, can be a coverage guy, can be a nickel player, but then also just, middle of the field defended by flat-footed safeties, that can play the run from that depth and then also catch technique and cover people. And you hit on it too. Having a guy like Iverson Brown who's played a lot of football, just the communication piece of that, of getting everybody where they're supposed to be and where your help is and all those kind of things is huge. And that's what I saw taking place in practice was they were really seemed like we had people on the same page.
Of all the positions that we can talk about, guys, in terms of depth, and that's what really good teams are. They're very deep. At linebacker, that may be the deepest position, and they have the clearest leader. We've talked about Colin Bohannon all the time, but man, it's going to be much more than just Colin Bohannon this year.
Oh, it is, and Coach Mack, he can put, I think, 7 to 8 guys interchangeable between them. And how much do you lose? Maybe that much between 1 and 7 and 8. They're that close together. Bohannon, he's the leader, without a doubt. But you've got the young kids coming up, the Bogles and the Shane Ross and the guys that have just been really, really good. And Shug Walker, the Murray State grad, is a ball player who was a walk-on at Murray State. And now here he is probably going to start the first ball game up at BYU. So the linebacker crew is just, I think, the deepest group out of the entire football team.
Well, and on this note, Coach Poor, you get a unique perspective because you've been a part of Coach Hill's staff. You, of course, were here when Coach Hill was a player. Being a part of Coach Hill's great success here. You're one of the most successful, if not most successful, assistant coach that's been through this program. Coach Hill talked about it, how last year the identity, the mentality of this team, he wanted to flip a bit and have it more of a defensive focus. Do you see that, and how can that really help Southern get to where they ultimately want to go, which is not where they were just last year? They want to go deeper into the postseason, and they want to host more than just one game here at Saluki Stadium.
Yeah, I think the key word there is trust. I think Coach truly got to a point where he could trust our defense, whatever situation they were thrust into, and there were several last year. But yeah, it's the old adage, defense wins championships, and it still comes back to missed assignments and missed alignments will beat you long before missed matches, because we're talented. We have the people, the bodies there.
We got one more unit to preview next week for your Saluki crew, and then it's on to BYU for our game week preview for the Cougars. Special teams next Friday, and the following Friday we'll be out in Provo, Utah, and getting ready for the first game of the year. It's here, gentlemen. It is here. Football is right around the corner. For more on Saluki football and the fall camp coverage, which has been brought to you by our friends, the Illinois Army National Guard. For my partners, Mike Trude and Pat Poor, I am Luke Martin. We'll talk to you next week, Saluki Nation.